9 funerals, 9 tiny caskets, 9 goodbyes that should never have happened. In a quiet corner in New York State, a mother stood graveside again and again and again. Each time, she cried. Each time, she collapsed into the arms of friends. Each time, the town whispered the same word. Unlucky, but luck does not explain patterns, and grief does not erase evidence. Between 1967 and 1985, 9 children died inside the same family. No intruders, no visible violence, no alarms raised until it was far too late. Tonight, we open a case that still haunts medicine, law enforcement, and child protection agencies to this day. This is the story of Marybeth Tinning and the cost of believing that monsters must look monstrous. Norwich, New York, a small town where neighbors recognize your car before your face, where church attendance matters, where privacy is respected and questioned behavior is often ignored. This was not a place where people expected evil, and certainly not inside a family home. Marybeth Rowe was born in 1942. Those who knew her describe her as quiet, reserved, almost fragile. She married Joseph Tinning, a factory worker, and settled into what looked like a modest, working-class life. No criminal history, no reported abuse, no visible chaos. Just a young couple trying to build a family. And then came the first child. In 1967, Marybeth gave birth to her first child, a baby girl. The child died in infancy. Doctors ruled it an accident. No autopsy was demanded. No investigation launched. Why would there be? Infant mortality was still poorly understood. Sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, was mysterious and terrifying, but common enough to discourage suspicion. Marybeth was devastated. She mourned publicly. She leaned into the sympathy of her community, and no one questioned her. Not yet. Then it happened again. Another pregnancy, another baby, another funeral. By the third death, whispers began. Not accusations, just confusion. Doctors reviewed files. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances. The children were healthy and no infections, no congenital defects. And most notably, the deaths always occurred when Marybeth was alone with a child. Still, nothing was done. Why? Because grief disarms suspicion. And Marybeth was very good at grieving. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, accusing a mother harming her own children was almost unthinkable. Maternal instinct was considered sacred. Motherhood equal protection, not danger. To accuse Marybeth would mean confronting a horrifying possibility that a woman could repeatedly kill her own children and hide behind sympathy. So authorities chose the easier explanation. Bad luck, medical mystery, God's will. Each explanation required less courage than the truth. By the 4th and 5th deaths, the medical community could no longer ignore the similarities. One doctor reportedly stated, "Statistically, this should not be possible. Yet statistics don't testify in court. Proof does." And there was none, at least none authorities were willing to act on. By the time Marybeth buried her 6th child, some hospital staff quietly refused to work her cases. But refusal is not prevention, and the system was about to fail again. Child Protective Services did open files. Investigations were launched, then quietly closed. Why? Because Marybeth always appeared cooperative, calm, soft-spoken. She never resisted questioning, never appeared defensive. In fact, she often seemed relieved. This behavior confused investigators. Was she overwhelmed, or was she rehearsed? No one pushed hard enough to find out. By the early 1980s, Marybeth Tinning had lost 8 children. 8! And still, she was free, still trusted, still capable of bringing another life into the world. 8 children were dead. 8 birth certificates. 8 death certificates. 8 tiny lives erased inside the same family. And still, no arrest, no charges, no decisive intervention. To the outside world, Marybeth Tinning was the unluckiest mother alive. But behind hospital walls, inside medical files, and within the minds of few uneasy professionals, a different truth was forming. A truth no one wanted to say out loud. At what point does tragedy stop being random? This question began quietly circulating among doctors who had treated the Tinning children. Infant death is heartbreaking, but statistically rare. Multiple infant deaths in one family? Even rarer. 8 deaths? That defied probability. Some physicians began reviewing past cases together, informally, cautiously. They noticed similarities that could no longer be ignored. No genetic disorder linking the deaths. No environmental toxin found. No consistent illness history. No signs of long-term neglect. And always, Marybeth was present. Still, none of this was enough to act, because suspicion without proof is a career-ending accusation. Marybeth Tinning did not behave like the villain people expected. She didn't flee. She didn't hide. She didn't show anger toward authorities. Instead, she leaned into grief. She attended funerals faithfully. She accepted sympathy. She spoke softly about her children. To outsiders, she looked broken. To professionals, she looked controlled. And control is harder to interpret than chaos. In the 1970s and early 1980s, there was no widespread understanding of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a condition where a caregiver harms dependents to gain attention or emotional reinforcement. Without that framework, Marybeth's behavior didn't fit any known criminal profile. So once again, institutions hesitated. Child Protective Services did open cases on the Tinning family. They interviewed Marybeth. They reviewed medical records. They assessed the home. And each time they closed a file. Why? Because CPS relies heavily on observable harm. And Marybeth's children were not visibly abused. They were clean, federal, clothed. There were no bruises, no fractures, no malnutrition. What CPS couldn't see was what happened in moments of isolation. Moments no system was designed to monitor. Neighbors noticed the funerals. Church members whispered prayers. But no one confronted Marybeth. Why? Because grief creates immunity. To accuse her would mean accusing a woman who had already lost everything. And no one wanted to be that person. This silence was not malicious. It was human, but it was deadly. By the 7th and 8th deaths, doctors began documenting concerns more explicitly. Some noted unusual family history. Others wrote cause unclear, review recommended. Still, no formal accusation was made. Why? Because once again, there was no definitive forensic evidence. Smothering leaves little trace, especially in children. And without cameras, witnesses, or confession, the deaths remained medically ambiguous. But all of that hesitation would be tested when Marybeth became pregnant again. In 1985, Marybeth gave birth to her 9th child, a baby girl. This time, hospital staff were alert. They documented everything. Vitals, interactions, behavior. Some nurses reportedly stayed longer than required, uneasy about leaving mother and child alone. But hospitals are not prisons. And eventually, Marybeth returned home with the baby. The baby did not live long. When authorities were notified, something had changed. There was no rush to close the file. No quick medical explanation. No immediate comfort offered. This time, police stayed. For nearly 2 decades, 8 children had died under circumstances no one could fully explain. Doctors hesitated. Social services closed files. Police stepped back. Not because the deaths made sense, but because accusing a grieving mother felt unthinkable. Then came the 9th child. And with that death, the question no institution could avoid any longer. What if this was never an accident at all? Marybeth Tinning was not arrested immediately. That decision was deliberate. Investigators knew this case required patience, not pressure. Marybeth was brought in for questioning. Not accused, not arrested, just asked to talk. She agreed. She was offered coffee. She was spoken to softly. She was treated with empathy. Not because police believed she was innocent, but because they believed she might talk. And Marybeth did. At first, she repeated familiar lines. Each death had been tragic. Each child had been loved. Each loss had devastated her. Her voice remained calm, controlled, almost rehearsed. Investigators avoided accusations. Instead, they focused on timelines. Walk us through that day. What happened next? Who else was home? Over hours, details were revisited again and again, not confrontationally. Methodically, this is where cracks often appear. And they did. Marybeth began contradicting herself. Subtly at first, the time of day shifted. Who was present changed. The sequence of events blurred. Each inconsistency was noted, not challenged immediately. Investigators let them stack. What mattered wasn't a single mistake. It was the pattern of revision. A pattern that suggested memory wasn't failing. A pattern that suggested a story was being adjusted. Then something changed. Marybeth stopped talking. She stared at the table. Minutes passed. The room stayed silent. This wasn't shock. This wasn't confusion. It was calculation. Investigators waited. When Marybeth finally spoke again, her tone was different. Flat, measured. She admitted responsibility. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just factually. She confessed to causing the deaths of her children, one by one, over the course of years. There was no rage described, no loss of control, just intent. She explained that it wasn't about anger. It wasn't about punishment. It was about something else entirely. Marybeth did not describe herself as evil. She described herself as empty. Investigators later testified that her confession lacked emotion. Not because she was lying, but because emotion had never been the driver. Experts would later suggest behavior consistent with attention-seeking pathology, often referred to as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, not formally diagnosed at the time of the crimes. And critically, not well understood when intervention could have saved lives. Medical experts later explained why the deaths had gone undetected for so long. Smothering leaves minimal physical evidence, especially in infants. Without bruising, fractures, or toxins, deaths can appear natural. And when a caregiver appears attentive and cooperative, suspicion drops even further. This wasn't a failure of one doctor. It was a failure of systems built on assumptions. As Marybeth continued speaking, investigators realized something chilling. If she had not confessed, there may never have been enough evidence to convict her. 9 deaths might have remained officially unexplained. The confession wasn't forced. It was offered, and that fact haunted everyone involved. Marybeth was formally charged, not with 9 counts, but with 1. A plea agreement followed. Why? Because prosecutors knew juries struggle with cases like this. Circumstantial evidence, medical ambiguity, a mother defendant. The confession became the cornerstone. Without it, justice may never have happened at all. Marybeth pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. No courtroom spectacle. No dramatic outbursts. She stood quietly, answered questions, accepted the plea. 9 deaths, condensed into a single legal conclusion. Marybeth Tinning was sentenced to 20 years to life. But sentencing was not the end of the story, because incarceration does not erase consequence, and prison does not silence controversy. The confession was over. The courtroom was quiet. The headlines were written. Marybeth Tinning, the mother whose children kept dying, was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. For the justice system, the case was closed. But for the families, the community, and the institutions that failed to stop her sooner, this was only the beginning. Marybeth stood before the judge without spectacle. No dramatic statements. No visible remorse. No denial. The court accepted her guilty plea to second-degree murder, a strategic decision by prosecutors. Why only 1 count? Because proving 9 separate murders beyond reasonable doubt would have been nearly impossible without the confession. The plea ensured incarceration, but it also ensured something else. Many questions would never be fully answered in court. The judge acknowledged the gravity of the case. 9 children were dead. 9 lives ended before they had truly begun. The sentence, 20 years to life, was both punishment and containment. It guaranteed Marybeth would not be free for decades, but it also left the door open, a door labeled parole. The public response was immediate and divided. Some believed life in prison was too lenient. Others believed the sentence was appropriate given the plea. Please let us know if she got the right judgment in the comment section. Moving forward. But nearly everyone agreed on one thing. This case exposed deep flaws in how society identifies danger. The question wasn't just what did she do? It was, how was she allowed to do it for so long? The victims were children who never had a voice. They left behind no testimony, no memories, no chance to grow. Their extended family members, grandparents, relatives were left with grief layered upon grief. And now, a new burden, the knowledge that the system had failed to protect them. Marybeth entered the New York State prison system quietly. She did not seek attention. She did not grant interviews. She became another inmate, but her case followed her. Correctional staff were aware of who she was. Inmates talked. Some expressed disgust. Others avoided her entirely. Even inside prison walls, her crimes isolated her. After serving the minimum portion of her sentence, Marybeth became eligible for parole. This is where the case returned to public attention. Each parole hearing reopened old wounds. Each hearing forced officials to confront the same terrifying question. Is this person safe to release? At early hearings, parole boards reviewed the nature of the crime, the number of victims, the confession, psychological assessments. Marybeth expressed compliance, but little insight. She acknowledged responsibility. But responsibility alone does not equal rehabilitation. The parole board denied release. Again and again, the board emphasized that releasing someone responsible for multiple child deaths would undermine public trust. This wasn't vengeance. It was precaution. As decades passed, debates intensified. Some advocates argued she had served decades in prison. She was elderly. She posed little physical threat. Others countered. Her crimes were calculated, not impulsive. Age does not erase risk. Release would re-traumatize victims' families. The case became symbolic, not just a crime, but of how society balances mercy with protection. Can someone who commits such acts be rehabilitated? Psychologists remain divided. Some argue that deeply ingrained patterns of behavior, especially those driven by psychological pathology, are resistant to change. Others suggest that decades of incarceration can reduce risk. But in cases involving repeated harm to vulnerable victims, uncertainty itself becomes unacceptable. Marybeth Tinning remains behind bars. But the most haunting part of this case is not where she is. It's what she reveals about us. Marybeth Tinning remains behind bars. Her sentence stands. Her parole was denied. Her name is permanently etched into the history of American crime. But this story does not end with incarceration, because when we reduce cases like this to a single villain, we miss the deeper truth. Marybeth Tinning did not act in a vacuum. She acted within a system, a culture, a web of assumptions that allowed harm to repeat itself again and again. Trust is the foundation of society. We trust parents to protect their children. We trust doctors to detect danger. We trust institutions to intervene when something goes wrong. But trust, when left unquestioned, becomes a blindfold. In the Tinning case, trust worked against justice. Doctors trusted maternal instinct. Social workers trusted cooperation. Neighbors trusted appearances. Each layer of trust reduced scrutiny. Each moment of hesitation created space for harm. And the most unsettling truth? Every individual involved believed they were acting responsibly. To understand why Marybeth Tinning wasn't stopped earlier, we must confront uncomfortable realities about how systems work. One of the most haunting aspects of this case is how many people sensed something was wrong, but stayed silent. Not out of cruelty, out of fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of ruining a reputation. Fear of professional consequences. This is not unique to this case. History shows us again and again, when harm hides behind respectability, silence becomes its greatest ally. The victims in this case are often reduced to numbers. 9 children, 9 deaths, but each child was a life with potential. They never spoke in court, never grew into memories, never told their side. Their stories exist only through records and through our responsibility to remember them. This documentary does not exist to elevate the perpetrator. It exists to restore attention to those who were never protected. There's a temptation to believe that monsters are obvious, that danger wears a face we can recognize. But the truth is far more unsettling. Sometimes, harm wears familiarity. It lives in ordinary homes, speaks in soft voices, earns trust. The Marybeth Tinning case reminds us that safety does not come from assumptions. It comes from attention, from asking uncomfortable questions, from listening to instincts, even when they conflict with appearances. If this story leaves you uneasy, it should, because unease is the beginning of awareness, and awareness saves lives. Share this story, not for views, but for awareness, because silence protects harm, and attention creates change. Subscribe to Mysterious Crime Box for more respectful true crime documentaries that examine not just what happened, but why it was allowed to happen.